Bye, Aunt Peggy.
Bye, my honeys.
Bye, Auntie.
See ya. Bye.
Okay, so we've got snacks.
God, I love that woman.
Got
What did she give us? Show me.
pretzels, strawberries,
We're off.
some
Do we have
cream
directions?
cheese thing, and nuts.
Is that a museum?
Where are we? Turn left. No, turn left. Justin, that is not your left.
I know. Wait, hang on. I gotta tell these people something. Okay, everybody, here we go. On today's episode, we're going to take a little road trip through the Berkshires in western Massachusetts with our friend and guest from episode 1, Hank Scollard. Hank is the architect with that super unique museum of unnecessary things in Cambridge. But today, he's our guide as we explore his design and creative endeavor at the Hotel Tourists in North Adams, Massachusetts. It's a bit of a departure from his eclectic collection, and we've coined the term rugged minimalist. The hotel opened in 2018 after a complete redesign on the site of the former Redwood Motor Lodge. We'll let Hank take us through on episode 2 of Artist Proof. Okay, sorry, I'm back.
Oh,
we're
there's
here.
the hotel up on the right. And there's Hank.
Hello, Hank. Man, he's got such good hair. Hello, tourists. We have arrived.
Barely.
Okay, so we're at Tourists, a hotel in North Adams, Massachusetts, which is in the far northwestern corner of the state, bordering New York and Vermont. Tourist is a 48-room hotel, and I'm an architect. I live in Cambridge, and this project came to me in about 2015, I think, when I worked at an office in Cambridge called Brunner Cott. And Brunner Cott were the architects of MoCa and had developed a reputation for transforming existing old structures like MoCa into new things. So MoCa went from the former electric parts plant to a contemporary art museum. And my client group were really transfixed by MoCa and thought that Brunner Cott would be a good firm to tackle this project, which at the time was going to be a simple renovation of an 18-room roadside motel called the Redwood Motel. And the client group consisted of primarily at that time 4 individuals: Ben Svensson, Scott Stedman, John Sturrott, and Eric Kearns. And John plays in Wilco, so he lives in Maine, but he's kind of all over. Scott and Ben live in Boston, and Eric lives out here. The project came to Brunner Cott, and then it came to me in the office, and it became my project. So I was really the only one working on this project, except for my boss, who at the time was having a bit of a disagreement with the client group about the direction of the project, and specifically how much of the existing motel should be preserved and transformed. My clients, Ben in particular, were very adamant that the existing motel, even though it's not as architecturally significant as the building that became MoCa, was worthy of living a new life and becoming part of the new chapter of the Redwood Motel. And my boss at the time was not of that opinion, and so it created a lot of internal conflict, and it really threatened to kind of derail the project. And it became clear at some point in time that this was going to be a project that really could only happen with the current people involved if I were to work on it independently. And so I broke away from the office, and this became my own project. And then we kind of just hit the deck running at that point. And as far as the client-architect relationship, I couldn't have envisioned a better one. Like we could not have been more in sync in our goals and in the vision we crafted. And like I was telling you before, I've collaborated with architects before, but never a client. But I did collaborate with this client. I think Ben in particular, he's not an architect, but he showed me things that kind of alerted me to things that I might not otherwise have come up with. So we, in a sense, collaborated on this project, and it was a better collaboration than I ever had with any other architect.
In perfect Hank fashion, this is more than just a building or just a hotel. It's a place of wonder and intrigue. To hear him describe what the word motel means is full of lore of both architecture and travel. It gives you some perspective before ever even entering the grounds.
And we were also, and this is something that I was really keen on exploiting, the kind of mysterious nature of motels and the repetition, but the sort of nondescriptness of the way a typical roadside motel presents itself to the world. It fills your mind, your imagination runs wild with what's going on in those rooms, who's staying there, who are these people, and it just like sets your mind racing. It's this mind, and I really wanted to play that up. So that's another reason why we left the facades as plain as we could, so that there would be this sense of mystery from cars passing by. They don't really. That's why people are so kind of surprised when they enter that portal by the lodge, walk through that threshold, and kind of see the scope of the site for the first time. It's not something you anticipate as you approach the building from the busy road.
Now, the Berkshires are an amazingly beautiful place, a quiet and serene countryside full of mountains and woods to explore. And North Adams, where the hotel was built, is a unique spot in of itself and has more to do than we could ever go over in one podcast. But one thing that lifts it above other similar places in Massachusetts is MoCa, a museum of contemporary art that you'd ordinarily find in a major city. But this one is tucked away in a small village that garners tens of thousands of museum goers each year. So there's this air about the place. You get a sense that the whole area hinges on creativity. Each choice made by Hank or the developers, or even the coffee shop on the corner, they were conscious decisions to establish a common goal of how the town and its community presents itself.
Where you just were. And that's it's funny, like the old Redwood Motel that existed here before, again, it was the lodge, it was the ranch house at the lodge, which was the caretaker's house. This first bank of rooms here was a wing of about 11 rooms, and then 90 degrees to that, kind of opposite where the ranch house was, there was another wing of about 7 rooms. And it was a complete, just stopover motel. Nobody would come here as a destination. So the rooms, they didn't even, there was a window and a door facing the road. The bathroom was in the back, and there was otherwise a small window in the bathroom, but otherwise there was no nothing. There was no window out to the back where where the woods is, where the river is, and there was nothing back there. It wasn't cultivated. It wasn't. It was just overgrown and inaccessible. So it was never meant to. We kind of reversed it. We took the same idea of having a motel here, but then we just flipped it so that the rooms all focused to the north, away from the road to the south. The parking area is not paved. We used gravel. When your car tires hit those paving stones, there's a tactile sense. You hear it and you feel it. You can feel the rubber on the gravel, and it just makes you think of, at least I think it makes most people think of being on a country road. And for people that are coming here from from New York or from Boston, from a city somewhere, and they're looking for a weekend getaway out in the Berkshires in a less dense area, we wanted them to feel like they've arrived when they pulled into the parking lot. And even if it's just for a few seconds until they park their car, but that sort of threshold begins not when you first walk into the lodge or through that portal, but when you first pull off Route 2, into the parking lot, and you can feel the rubber of your tires. You can feel the stones in the rubber creating friction, and you can hear that distinctive sound of car wheels on a gravel road, as the song goes. It puts you in a state of mind.
Hank and the team took the bones of an old motel and reformed it into tourist. The hotel sits on a 50-acre plot of land bordered by Route 2, which brings you into the town. And on the other side, rolling landscape, beautiful creek sides, and even a hidden sculpture garden that goes on and on and on. And not too far off is access to the Appalachian Trail. It's a little bit of everything tucked into this simple and pleasant design. It's a place to get lost in, to clear your head, a fresh restart.
Well, I think it was clear for us that one of our goals early on was going to be that we would be using commonplace materials, but in creative ways. I think it's much easier to use like luxury materials if you want to create a space that people feel pampered in. But we thought we could do that with ordinary materials, and yet we would also be scratching a part of their brain that might otherwise have been touched by showing people how an ordinary material can create that same sort of luxury feeling that like Venetian marble might, or some sort of richly veined stone. So we thought plywood would be a really good selection, and it also goes back to when the project first started. It was right around the time of the Solid Sound Festival in 2015. They used the old Redwood Motel, which was what this was in its previous incarnation, as kind of a home base for a lot of the people involved in the festival. John from Wilco and his family and some of the other band members, and they took the old Redwood Motel and they kind of tricked out several of the rooms so that people could stay there. And just to do it quick and on the cheap, they used a lot of plywood to, and we really liked how that looked. I thought, why can't that be the kind of aesthetic that we use for the new hotel? Because it's part of that aha factor. When people walk into these rooms, they're surrounded by materials that they don't normally see being used up front out there as nice finished materials. And it sort of stimulates the brain a little bit to kind of see how something can be used creatively that you had not imagined could be. Same with like the concrete floors, which are also heated, so there's a kind of a pampering effect as well there, but it's clearly like almost an industrial looking material. And we also saw, like, when you use large sheets of plywood, you really kind of bring out the grain of the wood. And to me, the grain, I mean, just to look at that, there's, it's not marble, but I get the same effect looking at that as I do looking at a big swath of marble. I mean, to touch it, to rub your hands over it, yeah, it's different. It's not going to feel the same, but it looks very similar. It has that same richness, and we felt that would be the way to really create a kind of a high design space in a setting like this, which is kind of rural and sort of agrarian. We didn't want anything that looked and felt too slick or too urban, but we definitely wanted that feeling of being in a high design environment. But we had to find that sweet spot where it felt like it was high design, but also kind of earthy and accessible at the same time. And the materials like plywood certainly helped get us there.
Is that the first thing that you're looking to do? I mean, there's visual stimulation. There's, like you're talking about, running your hand across the grain of that wood. There's a textural stimulation.
Yeah.
Is that one of the first things that you think of?
Well, it is now. It's not really something that was on my radar prior to this project. Again, I probably gained more from this project than the people I worked for, because I learned so much from them throughout this process. We kind of collaborated almost in the same way I might with another architect, because this was a passion project for them, and they had, they were full of really great ideas. It was kind of, in some ways it wasn't really fair. I just had to sit back a lot of times and just, cherry pick a lot of the good ideas I was hearing. So I think I learned far more from them than they might have from me during this. And I've developed since this project that particular approach to design that I can't say that I ever really embraced earlier. So thinking about the tactile qualities of materials, the way they feel, the way they sound and smell, we really, we really kind of explored that to the nth degree here. And I'd always thought that it would be a great way to approach a design process, but I've never actually done it until now. So we, in addition to like the plywood, we selected like the corrugated metal roof because it's a material that is easy to associate with rural and rustic settings, and at the same time, it looks kind of interesting. It has, when the sun hits it, it's got this high sheen that's really interesting to see. But also the way that rain hits it. It's, rain is like kind of rain will tend to bring somebody down, but if you can kind of romanticize it and make something maybe nostalgic about it, you can actually turn that rain into kind of a positive. And so I thought, well, what about a material that really kind of emphasizes the pitter patter of raindrops? Make rain something more than a nuisance, but something that stimulates the senses as one hears it. Well, we'll start with the door itself, which you can see is it's a standard metal door, but it's faced with the same white oak that we have on the building itself. So we wanted the doors to kind of go away. We knew there would be repetition. You'd see door after door. You'd see light fixture after light fixture. But we really wanted the plane of the facade of the building, the rooms, as they face outward, to be as nondescript as possible. And for that reason, we have a window in the bathroom, which is on an outside wall, but the window itself is not on the outside wall. It's on the inside, and it gets borrowed light from the other wall, because we did want natural light in the bathroom. I think, when we started designing a typical room, we sort of made a list of all the things we did and didn't like about your typical hotel rooms. And the first thing that I think a lot of people honed in on was the bathroom off to the side with no natural light. It's just a deadly space. It looks horrible, wet towels sitting on the floor in a pile, just a nasty little environment. So we definitely were going to bring in natural light to these bathrooms, but we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to compromise the kind of plainness of the outside wall by introducing a window, because we wanted to block out. You see, since most of the rooms have an entry that faces a very busy road, we wanted those facades to be as blank and as solid as possible. So any opening, any window is going to compromise the sound barrier that we were looking for in that wall. Size of each room is based on kind of a fiction. Like I was saying, we were originally going to renovate an existing 2 wings of rooms that were on the property, the old Redwood Motel. And so we sort of based the size of the room on what we could fit inside the existing shell that we were renovating. And then we wound up kind of expanding the rooms to the extent that it didn't make any sense to keep that structure. And in fact, during the process of designing the rooms, we came up with the idea of having these vaulted ceilings. So we would have just taken the roof off anyway. So it made more sense to start with a clean slate. But the size of the rooms were definitely based on what we could, what the best room we could fit in the footprint that we were working with before. So that when we changed the footprint, when we started from scratch, basically, we kept the same room size. We could have done anything at that point, but we stuck with the room that we designed to fit in that space because that was the one we liked the best. And it turns out that was, it was the ideal room anyway. And so it didn't really need to be changed, but that was sort of the thinking behind the kind of the room dimensions of the prototypical room.
One of the things that stands out the most to us as we tour the grounds is it just fits. This isn't some glossy glass and steel hotel plopped down in the middle of the woods. Nor was that ever the intention, and it shows. This place, much like everything Hank touches, just seems to mold and grow into its foundation. And yes, that sounds like we are our art and our art is us, but that seems to be the mode that Hank operates in, always. Somehow he just finds a way to make things fit, like they were meant to be.
I guess it's easier for me to consider the building being shaped by its community rather than the other way around. And I know it happens both ways. I know that you can have this building here that's reflects, that is, has a design that does its best to reflect the community that it's in, and it does its best to kind of manifest the nature of the community itself. But then once it's built, I think it sort of turns back the other way, and it starts to impact the community. I think that it would not surprise me to see other, if a building is successful in doing that, it would not surprise me to see other new buildings in that same community kind of sprout up in the, not necessarily in the image of the first building, but somehow influenced by that building. And so then the community, that can start to create a whole new vibe in that community that didn't exist beforehand. But I know that for the, most architects would like to think that the designs that they produce really reflect and responsible members of their specific communities, and that they're not alien or out of space or not belonging. Yeah, so it's a chestnut that you hear a lot of architects say, and again, I don't know who coined it to begin with, but the saying is that we shape our buildings and then they shape us, or something along those lines. And you hear it enough, and you kind of, your eyes kind of roll, and you get tired of. It's like a cliche. It's among many of architectural sayings. But then you think about it, that there's a kernel of truth there. That we do we make buildings, and a lot of times we make them based on what we think the community that they exist in is all about. And then, but once they're built, they take on a life of their own. They start impacting the community in ways that you don't think of at first. And it could be that a building is so prominent or so well received or influential that it's other versions of it sprout up around it. Maybe it introduces a new palette of materials that people had not considered before, and then you start seeing mimicked versions of that. So that's one way that buildings can kind of shape their communities. The tough balance here was to have a room that was very minimal and uncluttered and had very clean lines, but at the same time wasn't too austere or Spartan. It trying to find something that was minimal and warm at the same time was kind of tricky. And I think that's where certainly where the wood helps come into play. And Julie Pearson, she did a lot of our interiors here, and she's really responsible for any accoutrement you see, the artwork, the rugs, fabrics, pillows, anything that's kind of these books, just the lighting, obviously, anything that kind of adds to that creates the vibe of the space that she's responsible for, and I think that goes a long way towards kind of humanizing. Yeah, again, it's a kind of extension of using ordinary things, but in a maybe not in such a creative way, but just using ordinary things. Period. There was kind of this why not attitude that was behind a lot of these decisions. Why not do that? It is what it is. And you're I hate the word elite, but we're not trying to make this feel like an elite, high designy environment. It has to be touchable, embraceable. It has to meet people on their level because they're here to relax and not feel so uptight about being in a space that is I've been in some places that are really designed, they're so designed that I feel I get almost exhausted when I'm in them because I know how much work goes into designing and building. It doesn't put me at ease. And it's very important that people come here and be able to relax. And so it was one of those things where we were designing while building. We were learning from ourselves as we were seeing the building go up, and we were able to make decisions that we might not otherwise have made if just by looking at something on paper or even like a physical model, seeing something in reality, and just seeing the impact of walking into a room and confronting this large picture window with a window seat built in made us realize how much of a feature this really is, and it really should be played up a lot more than what we had been thinking, because it wasn't where we started. The window seat was not like one of the first things we thought of when we started to lay out a typical room. It was one of those opportunities we saw that we just went with, and then all of a sudden it became maybe the single most important element in a given room.
As if this place couldn't get any cooler, we take a short walk over the river, through the woods, and to grandmother's... well, not really. But we did stumble upon a sculpture garden that sings to us, with a little bit of help.
We've had a number of events where somebody would play this thing.
What's it called?
The chime chapel. It's a musical instrument. It's in tune, these pipes are keyed to something.
In addition to our pipe banging, North Adams is actually a bit of a hub for musicians. It's the site of the Solid Sound Music Festival, which didn't happen this year or last, for obvious reasons, but will be returning next summer in 2022.
The last two Solid Sounds they've had, the last night of the festival, there's always a big party back here at the hotel, these last two times, and each one is ended with Glenn, from the drummer from Wilco, playing this thing, and with some side musicians. Either Nels Klein from Wilco might play guitar, or there might be somebody else on bass, and there might be somebody playing a horn. But it's kind of like an improvised musical thing centered on this, and it's actually it's pretty fascinating. It's a lot of fun. There's maybe a couple hundred people surrounding it. But there's a lot of really interesting and creative people, artists that live in the area here, and one of them, his name is Mark Stewart, and he's a musician, and I think he has been Paul Simon's musical director for a number of years, and they engage him here at the hotel quite frequently for when they have an event, and he does these kind of musical workshops where he brings in all these ad hoc materials, a lot of duct work and things like that, and he coaches people in how to make sound and even musical sounds from these these construction artifacts, and it's a lot of fun. He's really an engaging guy, and he gets everybody involved, and people, before you know it, you've got a group of people that are sort of making a noise like this or some sort of musical racket, but just using just stuff you find lying around.
When you're talking about working on different projects here, and do you ever see a project being finished? When you showed up here, we were talking about this on the way, but when you first got here, you're examining the wood and seeing the different patterns that are happening from the weathering. And is a project ever finished for you, or is there an intention to create spaces that are ever evolving, even if that's just the natural change that happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think that projects are ever really finished, even when they are finished, because and as much as I try not, and I think I mentioned earlier that I try not to second guess myself, and I don't think I do in any major ways, but I'm always kind of remixing things in my head when I come back to a space, even especially here. There's always little things that. And I think it's because I have such a vivid memory of all of the ideas that went into this building that still are out there like ghosts. So there's a slew of studies. Like for every little thing you see here, there were probably 15 drawings made to get to that point. And of those 15 drawings, there were a lot of other ideas that were brought up, and then they were not embraced, or they led to another idea, which led to something else, which is what finally wound up being built. But those other ideas, they're like energy. They don't die. They don't go away. Once you birth an idea, it's always going to be floating out there somewhere. And for me, those ideas are always here. So I can't look at anything here without recalling the model I made, to look at the thing that we didn't build, or the elevation or perspective study I did to look at the roof shape that we didn't go with. And I'm always seeing that. They sort of haunt the place for me. For me, I know that I don't really second guess myself, but I since I constantly am made aware, or since I constantly recall those ghosts of ideas that kind of gave their lives so that others could live on, this place is never really finished, because it's always like it's almost like there's a parallel universe or several parallel universes where this hotel exists, but we did do that different lodge design, or we did not offset this one wing from that wing, and things like that. So it's never really going to feel like it's completely done to me. Well, I don't specifically know how I get there from here, but I know that my goals in design projects tend to be the same, and that applies to any kind of work I do creatively. I would like anything I produce to be a manifestation of me as an individual. I would like my personality. Like, I think buildings have personalities, and I know that, we've talked earlier about how we've alluded to the fact that there are a lot of people, I think, that find things that are overly designed. They're suspicious of things that tend to be overly designed, and I think it's because they sense that if every building has a personality, the personality of something that's really slick and over-designed is simply off-putting to a lot of people. It's like a person that you don't want to be cornered with at a party. I'm not really sure how I get there. I don't really know the moves I make to specifically get there, but I do know that that's my intention. That I'm the kind of person that I like to put people at ease. I don't want to. I don't want to be like an intimidating person. I don't want to be distant or aloof. I think I'm an opening, kind of welcoming person, and I strive to have buildings reflect that in whatever way I can. And even if there are elements of high design in the work, I think that it still needs to be kind of accessible to people and not distance in any way.
And that's what this is all about. Artist Proof, the podcast, creativity, being creative in everything that we do. That force in our brains, it's all about what makes us tick. What makes Hank design buildings with purpose, and then go off and curate his home with this unique collection of trinkets and found objects. We've spent these last 2 episodes with Hank listening and learning about the foundation that his creativity sits on. What makes him tick? What makes our own synapses fire and push us to create something from nothing?
Like, nobody asks me these questions, and I never think of them, because I honestly don't step outside myself that often to look to kind of critique myself or just analyze my own thought process. So it's great to have an outside person that knows the right questions to ask. It forces me to kind of consider what is going on behind some of these moves, and what is the psychological underpinning of the work, because it's really there in everything, but we don't always we don't always consider it. We don't always step back and ask ourselves that same question. We just sort of take it for granted that the design process is what it is. Decisions are made for whatever reason, but I've never really taken the time to kind of, step back and analyze this thing and get a better sense of what it is we did here.
Thanks for joining us on episode 2 of Artist Proof. And a special thanks to both Hank Scollard and Tourists Hotel for being a part of these episodes. I highly encourage you to check out more on Hank and his design of the hotel. You can find more on his website, hankdesign.net, or his Instagram @HenryScollard. If you're looking for a getaway in the Berkshires, or just want to explore all the details of the property, head over to touristswelcome.com. They're open and currently booking 7 nights a week. And finally, the obligatory support ask. If you like this episode, feel free to visit our Patreon to see images and videos each week, along with bonus content you can't find anywhere else. Every little bit of support we receive helps us create more to bring you amazing, talented artists from around the world. You can find links to this and more on our Instagram @ArtistProofOfficial. Speaking of, on our next episode, we head down to Brooklyn to visit artist Alex Reyes. We dive into memory, family, loss, and even tackle what it's like being an artist in New York City.
I love talking about this part. I'm so glad you brought it up because I wouldn't have said anything. So my grandparents are from Mexico. Yeah, growing up with, my family, we would always have my grandparents staying with us. So we connected, we had this special bond. And I say we had because it's not as close as it was, obviously, because I was a kid, but it's still there. It's like lingering. It's like, those are my people. They took care of me. I was a grandpa and grandma's boy. As of recently, like 5 years ago, he has dementia. His legs can't work that much anymore. And I was like, I have to create about these moments in that time. In the moment when I was creating it, I didn't realize how sad it was, or how meaningful it was gonna be. I felt like I was running out of time when I made that, which is, I think, why it's one of my strongest pieces, because I was like, this is my grandpa, this is my lifeline. So
that's next time on Artist Proof. This episode has been a production of Wilder Media.